This time on Poll Hub, how does access to so-called third spaces impact if somebody's going to vote? Well, it turns out there is a connection, and we're talking with a researcher who's been asking Americans about this. The results are fascinating. We're going to let this one take over the whole show. It's a really good segment. And then, of course, we have to have a fun fact. And, well, if you've been in almost any store recently, it's already Christmas. That's a hint. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm JD Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
I'm Mary Griffith.
And I'm Lee Marengoff.
So on this podcast, we have talked about third spaces in the past. In fact, we had a segment not that long ago about how vanishing third spaces, how that's impacting everything from loneliness, mental health, all kinds of things. We came across something that was really interesting, though, in the last month or so, which is the link between third spaces, or the lack thereof, and voting behavior. And of course, we love to talk about voting behavior. We are a public opinion poll, after all, and a lot of them concern elections. And so this article is based on some data from a nonprofit civic engagement organization called Murmuration. And the author of this article, The Loss of Everyday Spaces is Undermining Democracy, is Sarah Stamper. And we thought, instead of talking about it, why don't we talk with Sarah Stamper? And she is here now. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about what I think is really important, critical civic infrastructure and the disappearance of third spaces and the impact it's having on our democracy.
So let's talk about that and what you found. We have, as I mentioned, talked about third spaces a couple times on the podcast. Maybe quickly, what is a third space? But then what is it that you found and what we were talking about in terms of this linkage between what people do in the voting booth or don't and the availability of third spaces?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So back in 1989, Ray Oldenburg, a urban sociologist, published a book that many know called The Great Good Place. And in it, he outlined the term for third places, which is really not your home, not your work. It is all the other places that you can go to have social interaction and to sort of build a sense for shared purpose and identity in your communities. And so I think about it as the places where you can linger, the cafes, the bookstores, the libraries, the public parks. And what we have found is that increasingly people no longer have access to these third spaces. And so when we ask folks, an initiative that we have called Civic Pulse, where every day we're talking to 500 different people all across the country about their hopes, their dreams, what's keeping them up at night, we were getting more and more data about the impact that it was having, the loss of third spaces. And so we decided to do a deep dive on that. And back in September and October, we started asking more and more intentional questions about where are you spending your time? What are the places that help you feel connected to others? And what we found was rather alarming, which is that 15% of people have no third spaces. Another 49% of people only have one or two. And then, of course, about a quarter of people have access to some, and a 10% swath of the population have access to many, 5 or more third spaces. Not only does it have impact, as you sort of outlined in the intro, on loneliness and mental health, but also on connection to your community. So thinking that your community cares about you, that your community well-being is excellent, that your community is made for people like you. And I think that echoes what you found before and what you've already discussed. What's new in the work that we put out is that it also impacts not just how you feel, but what you actually do. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at voting locally, you get a 7-point drop if you don't have access to third spaces. You're 20 points less likely to have engaged in parts of civic life, and you are 11 points less likely to actually interact with people who hold different political beliefs than you, or to trust people who hold different political beliefs than you to act in good faith. And so no matter what we measure, whether we're looking at volunteering, donating, attending events, going to a rally, contacting an elected official, you get these really stark declines in engagement through sort of the lack of having access to third spaces.
Yeah, this is really very, very interesting because it obviously is so topical and it's been something that both the decline in third spaces and the decline voting seem to be on the same, graph. So how much of this, you mentioned urban sociology, how much of this is a product, do you think, of the density of population? I'm thinking urban, I'm thinking suburban, I'm thinking rural. I'm trying to relate this phenomena to each of those areas, and knowing that the problem is not any single region, but I'm wondering if there are third places, whether that shows up, third spaces, I'm sorry, whether that shows up in any of the numbers that you crunch.
No, you're spot on observation. So it tends to be that the isolation runs deepest in rural communities.
Okay.
So it is true that there's sort of a consistent and persistent gap between urban and rural voter turnout. And of course, it depends on the exact election, but you'll maybe, if you see 65% of folks in rural communities turn out to vote, you'll probably expect 69% or so in the urban centers. Surprisingly, we see some differences between rural and urban communities with respect to the availability of third spaces, which is that we get a drop, right? Like those who live in rural are about 4% more likely to say that they have none or that they have few third spaces, and slight drops in the kinds of third spaces that they reference. So a little less likely to reference a school, a cultural center, a community center, a little more likely then to talk about a park or outdoor space, a sports facility, recreation, or even a local business. And so we see shifts in the availability of third spaces, the distance that folks have to travel to those third spaces, the impact of walkability versus driving, and then also the type of third spaces really being less focused on sort of culture and community centers and education as a place, and much more about local businesses and faith centers and those great outdoor sort of spots that people love to go to.
I was a little surprised at how little the difference was between these geographies. I mean,
Yeah, me too.
4% isn't very much. What I was more surprised by, though, was this kind of direct tie between third spaces and voting. And I'm wondering, sometimes we talk about just because something it looks like it's related doesn't mean it is. And I'm wondering, is it a direct link, or is it something that points to another factor that maybe are related but aren't directly connected?
Yeah, I mean, in science, attribution and causality is always the trickiest thing to figure out. What we know for sure is that when we account and control for partisanship, for education, for income, for age, for gender, for basically you name it, these effects are still there. And so I do think that there is, supported by the data, a relationship between third spaces and actual civic and community engagement. Whether there's an intermediate factor around belongingness and actual inclusion in the community, we have not completely disentangled yet. I would expect it to be a little bit of both, right? When you think about the sort of what is necessary for democracy and for a vibrant civil society and for citizens to participate, how much of that happens because you can collide with one another in these really informal, low stakes environments. It goes all the way back to sort of our foundings, right? When you think about the Green Dragon and sort of the headquarters of the revolution, and if you've ever seen Hamilton, how much of that actually took place in pubs
In a pub,
the
right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think when you think about the opportunity for knowing what's happening, for feeling like you belong, and then for getting the reminders even of, hey, we're going to have an election, or hey, people in our community are hungry right now, let's start a food bank, or, my daughter's school is doing a fundraiser, XXX, like all of those low stakes interactions that you can have in a bookstore or in a cafe or in the pub, right? My personal favorite third space, the pub.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, Jay, I was thinking, of a former colleague at WNBC in New York who he would go to the diners and go out to Queens, New York, if he was covering a mayoralty, and kind of chew it over with the folks there. And then, he would talk to us and we'd be talking about representative samples. But he was old school, and he didn't go with representative samples, but what you're talking about is the collective decline. And I'm thinking also of the huge growth of technology, and we have now this massive modes of communication, and we have concurrent isolation and the lack of communication. So the technology has taken us so far that we no longer feel the need to have some of these things that do connect us in ways. So, and I think that might also be an urban, suburban versus rural phenomenon too, to reinforce what you were saying.
I'm just wondering, picking up on what Lee said, how does social media play in? We've talked about it in the loss of third spaces, third places, but how do you think that plays into civic engagement, that piece of the third spaces, and how that relates to, for instance, to voting?
Great question. So the reason that I intentionally try to use third spaces rather than places is to give space, no pun intended, for the online communities that we have built. What we find, though, in our data consistently is that digital belonging is not the same as in real life belonging. And that even if you are a part of digital communities, that you do not feel that sense of belonging in the same way. And so what we actually find is exactly what you would then predict, that you don't have the same impact on civic engagement and participation or community strength the way that you get for people who belong in in-person communities. And when we ask explicitly about where you feel most connected, the in-person spaces, like I mentioned, the parks, the sports facilities, the businesses, we see anywhere between 23 to 47% of folks naming one of those spaces. We get 20% or less naming online communities. Interestingly, for online communities, one of the best places that we actually do see is Discord. And in part because it can facilitate some of the same accidental kinds of interactions that you can have in person, right? That it's a little less curated, it's a little bit messier, but you can go back to the same kinds of places and hopefully run into similar kinds of people as you've talked to before. But there's a lot more sort of like organic capacity to explore and communicate there versus some of the platforms now, which are completely driven by algorithms. And you can be on Facebook now and you can get 12 posts that like aren't actually social anymore. They're not from your friends.
No.
And so
It's interesting.
I've seen folks start to talk about, is this social media or is this anti-social media now?
Yeah.
And what are the ways that it's in fact like radically accelerating the very designed and intentional political polarization that we have.
Yeah.
And so I know that we're not going to go to a strictly in-person world ever again, but I love these hybrid approaches of how do we think about using online and digital spaces to reinforce what we can do together in physical space.
I was just wondering, we just saw in the election in New York City that Zohran Mamdani, a lot of the focus on his election campaign was on in-person things. As campaigns have gotten away from that, and we all have text messages proving that campaigns have gotten away from that over the last 8 years, right? I mean, your phone blows up with everybody wants money generally. But it was a really it's kind of an old school campaign in some ways, while at the same time being very new school and new generation in terms of the social media, the way that social media is used. But these ideas of putting together people that would go door to door or pizza parties to that kind of thing is maybe I'm trying to connect something that doesn't exist, but maybe those aren't third spaces, but they do seem to be, that campaign seems to have tapped into a desire, especially among a younger generation, for real things, IRL stuff that drives engagement. I mean, after all, he drove tons of voters who don't vote, never voted, to the polls, which seems to, maybe I'm making a link that doesn't exist here. I don't know. What do you, I have no question, right? What am I saying?
Your observations are right? Like I don't live in New York, but I spend a lot of time there. Murmuration's headquarters is in New York. He was out at the club at 1 a.m.
Wow.
Right? And so it's this combination of what we've always said people are hungry for based on the data is meet me where I'm at. If people were at the club at 1 a.m., he was at the club at 1 a.m. Second to that, there has been a hunger, particularly now you're seeing it more and more with AI misinformation, but a hunger for folks to have, even if it's messier, authenticity and transparency. And so, like all of him were not, right? Like he was authentically himself. He held to his beliefs and he was sort of steady in what he was saying throughout all of his messages, which then to young people actually doesn't come across as a message. We have a whole initiative to study Gen Z as sort of the youngest voting bloc who is emerging as this like huge force in civic engagement and community spaces. And that's what they've always asked for, right? Is like, be real, tell us what you're about. And if our values match, we're going to show up and we're going to vote for you. They did. And we'll volunteer for you. They did. And I think that what you're seeing here is this combination of people in the data and when you speak with them being really exhausted by the status quo of politics and yet really hungry for community and for civic engagement. And he blended that in a way that was really resonant with the folks on the ground.
And not uniquely. I mean, we're seeing a generational change. Well, that's also connected to technology and different, like you say, belongingness feeling. Like one of the things I thought about this article and just what we're talking about is, unlike a lot of work, I see direct public policy implications from this. So if I were the mayor of, let's say Baltimore, for example, what might I do to now address these problems in a concrete way? Because this isn't as much, I mean, it's research and you're looking at different, they say causality, associations, but it's about concrete policies too. So I wanted to make sure we talk a little bit about that.
Of course. So first, shout out to Brandon Scott. He is our mayor of Baltimore. And if he was going to call me and say, Sarah, what do I do about this? I would really tell him 4 things. I would say we have to start treating third spaces as infrastructure, right? There are things that are civic infrastructure that we don't think about the same ways as roads or Wi-Fi, and yet we should. So invest in it as if it was infrastructure. We already have tremendous capacity to unlock what we have. We have amazing, beautiful college campuses that could extend hours, open access to green spaces. We have community centers and faith centers that actually, like many places in the country, have shuttered. And yet some of the church spaces that have closed or synagogues in Baltimore have actually been repurposed. So right next to Druid Hill Park, they have taken an old historic synagogue and it is now literally called Third Spaces and it is existing as a community center. We have another church in Fells Point, Baltimore that has created a sort of like fitness center, right, called Sanctuary, where you can get physical therapy and you can work out, but they host events and they do things for the community too. So you have to unlock what we already have and then design for belonging. One of the starkest findings in Civic Pulse right now is the economic pressure that folks are under. And even just in the last 10,000 responses, the shift for those who have been getting by or struggling, right, is more and more and more. So like every day we're watching people slide from prosperous to comfortable, from comfortable to getting by, from getting by to struggling. And when you think about belonging, if a latte costs $7, or if you have to pay $25 to go to the O's game, or the membership to the organization is $200 a month, like what is that doing to who can belong, who can feel included, and who can use those spaces? So I'd say to him, like, first and foremost, design for belonging. And right now, financial comfort is one of the biggest divides that we're seeing. And finally, back to full circle to our conversation earlier about rural. Obviously, Baltimore is not a rural community, but you should invest where isolation runs deepest. And one of the deepest divides that we do see is in rural communities, but certainly there is isolation in other parts and pockets, even in Baltimore. And we should be making sure that we're building third spaces there, particularly given how important it is that those communities have their voices elevated, that they feel like they're a part of a community that is built for them and where they can thrive. And so making sure that third spaces are being put into those communities in order to then foster all of the downstream effects, like you mentioned at the top, right? Loneliness, mental health, but also now civic engagement and voting, I think is really critical.
Did you reference $25 for an Orioles game? Is that what you were saying?
Look, the O's weren't great this year, so prices did drop a bit.
At Yankee Stadium, I pay more for parking than that.
You pay more for a hot dog at Yankee Stadium.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say those were the best seats, but you can last minute grab a seat for not too much money.
But the stadium is wonderful, so
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful stadium.
Well, Sarah Stamper, thanks for joining us. The organization is called Murmuration, and again, it's a nonprofit civic org. How do you describe it exactly?
I typically say that Murmuration is a nonprofit working to strengthen community engagement. We organize a network of folks, and then we make sure to equip community-focused organizations with the insights, tools, and services that they need to effectively build power in their communities. Our theory really is that everyone should be able to live a free, healthy, and dignified life. And that all comes down to, can communities actually thrive, and can we participate in a healthy democratic culture? And so that's really what we're all about.
That's why I let you explain what Murmuration does, because that was a lot better than me. And I kind of undersold you at the top as the author of this blog post. You're a neuroscientist, I should say, who's leading this effort around data and research tools at Murmuration.
She plays a political scientist in interviews.
And she does.
I moonlight now as a journalist. So thank you so much for the time and for being interested in the work. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And it is a really fascinating way to look at why people vote and what things outside of the normal toolbox we might think about to get more people to vote. Thanks again.
Well, if there is a season of belonging and togetherness, we're about to cut the ribbon on that. And the question which was asked by Yankelovich Group for Time Magazine in 1992, when do you plan to start your Christmas shopping? Before Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, not until the middle of December, and not until a few days before Christmas. And the number one answer was 37% with before Thanksgiving, and 34% was after Thanksgiving, and the rest kind of a little bit fewer. But a low number of 12%, I was surprised, said just a few days before the holidays. And that sort of belies what goes on in stores.
They're all men. That 12%,
yeah,
they're all
I was
men.
going to say that. We have done studies on that and some polling over the years. And yeah, the late shoppers are the men, and clearly not on 1992 do we have online shopping. So I think that would be a choice of. So why don't I start, Jay? I was going to start with you here, and I want to know whether you've already thought about my holiday present, or you've bought it, and what would you be?
I crossed you off my list this year, Lee. So.
Because you already got it. Yeah,
I used to start earlier. I used to, during the course of the year, if I saw something, I used to be one of those people that would, that's going to be great. And I am not that person anymore. I think about it definitely after Thanksgiving. I do not think about it before Thanksgiving. And it is like the triggers of Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all those that kind of get me going, I guess I better think about this. But I also have increasingly bought things like experiences or dinner someplace for somebody, things like that, as opposed to stuff. I'm kind of in that era of the people that I buy for where we don't need anything. So, and I'm not buying socks and underwear for people. So, yeah, so I'm definitely in the later end of this, but not a few days before. I don't do that.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, Mary, why don't you jump in? You've got a whole gang you have to put onto your list. Santa has to be very active in your house.
Well, yeah, that's Santa. So in terms of my list, I always shop after Thanksgiving. I'm more of a traditionalist in that sense. I don't like to think about Christmas until we hit Thanksgiving. But when I was younger, we always had December 8th off at school. So that would traditionally be when I was in high school, when I would go shopping, and my mom and I would go shopping together. So it was a bit of a family tradition. But I can't wrap my brain around Christmas truly until after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I totally get that. That's sort of where I would be on this. Barb, I am accepting baseball cards this year. But anyway,
you've got boxes full.
I know, but it's never enough.
Cards. There's never enough baseball.
So you're an online kid, right? You're
absolutely everything online, and I don't really do much shopping before Thanksgiving, although um, I do sometimes make a list of things
Okay.
that I have seen along the way during the year. So they see
Okay.
something that has liked or, was thinking about, I'll kind of make note of it. And if it's still around by December, it'll be something I look for. But yeah, not terribly a mall shopper. So, or a store shopper. So I definitely have to do it for Thanksgiving. Yeah, plenty of time. So I'm not paying those extra shipping charges. But I will admit that I have spent probably more than the gift to get something at my door. I have forgotten
Yeah.
up till that point.
Yeah, I was thinking I don't have to worry about this question because I use the "it's better to receive than give" philosophy. But anyway,
Well,
down home.
well, you like
Humbug.
everybody's
Come
holiday,
on,
Lee.
Yeah,
Lee.
You like
well,
everybody's holiday, especially if there's food and there are
yes,
presents
and,
involved.
and football when my team plays football. Sylvia, what is the story here on we're going to go skip down to a different generation. So why don't we bring you in and the others in a minute?
I think I'm a combination of Barb and Day. I like throughout the year, if I see something that I really like, I'll put it in my notes app and then I'll come back to it. But I won't actually consider anything or like buying anything for Christmas shopping until after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
I can't stand that we skip over Thanksgiving between Halloween and Christmas. We need to give Thanksgiving its moment.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yep, totally.
But yet-
yeah,
Absolutely.
I am not happy that all the local radio stations have already switched over to Christmas and all kinds of holiday music. Too soon, as they say.
Yeah. For me, I find it very odd and so early. Anyway, now is this your first appearance on podcast, or
You talking about Molly?
Oh, me?
Is
Yes,
this-
it's my first time.
okay? So what? And when should I expect the gift from you this year? I'm so bad.
Always plugging, Lee. Always
Yeah,
plugging.
you can, what did Mario Cuomo used to say? If you don't toot your own horn, there's no music or something like that. Anyway, hi, welcome.
I usually go Christmas shopping after Thanksgiving, usually on Black Friday. I'm more of a in-person shopper,
Oh,
so I
okay.
like to go to all the stores and make my day out of it. But my roommates think the opposite, and they've already started planning
Wow.
for Christmas. We already have our Christmas tree up in our apartment.
Very good. I think
Wow,
that's
that's
You have,
awesome.
you have a
Is it a real tree?
Oh no, it's a fake tree. But
In
they
your-
they're crazy about Christmas, so
you have a tree in your college apartment. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
I did not do that when I was in college. Wow. I'm stunned.
I do have some lighted cranberry branches on the center of the kitchen table.
Already?
So
You've broken your own rule,
Already.
Barb.
I know, I did. I know, but they were on sale. They did come, and I was like, well, should I put them away? And it was like, no.
okay.
I have
AJ,
resurrected the inflatable turkey for Thanksgiving. That is, I want something, but I am not ready to go Christmas yet.
I love that.
And I thought cranberries were actually kind of Thanksgiving-esque, so it made a nice centerpiece.
Yeah, Mary, also recently, I don't know how recent, but you introduced me to the concept of an elf on the shelf or something. That's also a holiday
Oh, dear.
spin-off.
Oh,
That could be a whole nother
Yeah,
fun
we'll
fact.
save that
that's
one.
another
But what about
segment.
AJ?
AJ, what do you got?
Yeah, it's not a thought for me until December, usually, at least. Sometimes
How far
later.
into December, AJ?
24th.
No comment.
It's another 24th. Yeah.
I've gotten better, but yeah, usually quite a bit. And quite close to the holiday itself, maybe.
But you have to get so
That's
you wait till you get back from school till finals are over and stuff for the last
Yes.
4 years. Yeah. So then you get back home
sure.
and then
I'm
you
sure
start
that's
thinking
the
about it.
excuse.
Yeah, it's finals. I can't buy anything until finals
That's
are
right.
over.
I'd like to ask our college student producers. I'm curious. I'll just go around start with Sylvia. Yeah. How many people are on your list, do you think, or roughly, if you haven't made a list yet? But what are we talking here? 5, 10, 15? What do we got here? Don't count me
I
out.
feel like I have I have a family of 5, so I have like my immediate family and then the grandparents, the cousins, the friends. So like the main gift, I would say 5, and then the kind of the external, kind of on the fringe, maybe like upwards of 15.
Okay, Molly, how about you?
The same goes for me. Usually like 5 main presents, and then I'll do some small gifts here and there for my friends.
Yeah, AJ, what do you got? Where do you clock in on this?
5
Yeah.
as the upper limit.
Yep. Last quick question: do you ever give multiple presents to the same person? Sylvia, we'll go around. We got.
Yeah, like my parents, my brothers. I would give multiple presents to them, I think.
Yeah, same for
All
me.
right. And AJ, are you with it? No.
No.
I think the question Lee's trying to ask is, would you give him multiple
No,
presents?
no, I thought
Yeah, you're fishing, Lee. You're fishing. It's just so obvious, really. Come on.
It's the Yankees, and it's
And not becoming of a pollster.
well, yeah. Well, I was asking a lot of questions. I thought that was very Polster-esque. But anyway, that wraps it up. Haha. There's a pun in there. Presents, wrap. Got it. Okay. We will see you all next week for another rendition or
Rendition of
edition.
Poll.
I don't know what we're
Yeah.
doing.
See ya.
Love it on the show, folks.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist University in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes AJ Gambino, Tommy Rogers, Cassie Connors, Sylvia Weiser, and Molly Goodger.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal accessible from our website.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button. Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.